Good morning, everyone. Here we are again. I'm happy to see all of you once again on screen and greeting you from the layout from El Bundy. Hope you are having a lovely day. Hope you had some time to chill during Easter. And now we are back on the horses again with the mini meetups. This is our third mini meetup in a row. If you would like to know what's up next, you can visit hipter.agency on the event center to see our upcoming events. We have many events. As I think you already know that we have also switched Mare Balticum to virtual, and it will take place in 2 sets. On the 13th of May, we will focus on the Baltics, and on the 18th of May on the Nordics. And today we have some special guests in this mini meetup, which will be moderated by our good old friend, Dr. Jörg Hoffmann. It focuses on the Sprechen Sie Deutsch region and on the Balkans and Baltic regions. So Jörg, I would like to invite you to switch on your microphone, and you can already start. I don't know if you're already familiar with this setup. Everyone is invited to join in on the conversation if they would like to add to the topic. You just send a message to Jörg and he will let you in. Okay, Jörg.
Thank you very much, Zoltan, for this lovely welcome introduction. Good morning to everybody. I'd like to start this panel discussion by introducing you to my panelists. And of course, ladies first, I'd like to start with Dr. Raffaela Zillner from Austria. She's from Vienna. Raffaela is Secretary General of the Austrian Association for Betting and Gambling, which is an interest group representing the online gambling and betting operators in Austria. And as a lawyer, she has, of course, many years of experience in gambling and sports betting law, and in her function advocates for modern and sustainable regulation of the online sector in Austria. I'm keen to learn what's going on in Austria because there's a lot to tell, and we start with you after my introduction of the panelists and receiving an overview on the most recent and the future developments in Austria. So then next to Austria, there's a wonderful country called Switzerland, where I'm happy to welcome Dr. Simon Planzer, who is founding partner at Planzer Law firm in Zurich, which has a very strong focus on international gambling, entertainment, and technology matters. We can also say Simon's focus on academic research is very highly regarded in the gaming sphere as well. Welcome, Simon. I'm pleased to have you on board of this panel. It's very esteemed. Zlatan Omarsparic was the Group Compliance and Privacy Officer in Symphony Group. During his career, Zlatan has held several compliance-related roles in banking, gaming, and IT industry. His professional interests are related with compliance and privacy issues, gaming law, competition law, and regulatory law. And as you see from the topic, from the headline of our topic, we're covering the DACH region and the Baltics, and as well as the Balkan region. Zlatan will be happy to provide an overview on the Balkan region, in particular on what's going on in Montenegro and in the Republic of Srpska, which is part of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm even happy to pronounce it almost correctly, Zlatan. There are new betting laws upcoming, and we are happy to get first-hand information with you. And finally, Andreas Gabnius, attorney at law, Gabnius Law Firm, founding attorney who's been working on the online gambling industry for more than 10 years, focusing on multi-jurisdictional licensing, legal and IT compliance, intellectual property, and commercial matters. He has also extensive experience dealing with the gambling authorities in Europe, but also outside CIS countries, Africa and South Africa. And it's a brilliant address to be contacted if you want to know anything important, anything that happened most recently in the Baltics area, because he comes from Vilnius and covers all these states in that region. This should be sufficient with my introduction. I'm happy to start our discussion now. And as I said before, it's ladies first. Rafaela, please do let us know what's going on in Austria. We're expecting a short presentation. And then later we start a round of discussion. We're taking questions from the audience. And we come back with further presentations of the panelists. The goal is not to have these standalone presentations, which are boring, but just give you a little bit of information and then develop further more and more information so we can round up an overview on all these jurisdictions we're covering today. And I like to say that, of course, Germany will also be part of it because I'm a German gambling lawyer with Melchus, and I'm happy to provide some first-hand information on the developments here in Germany. And this is, of course, exciting, and you'll be surprised. Thank you very much, Rafaela. I'm happy to listen.
Thank you very much, Jörg, for the kind introduction. And hey, everyone, thanks for having me. Well, Austria might be a very small country, but we have so much going on right now that it's hard to believe. And the gambling industry and the gambling sector is not getting out of the headlines these days. Before we dive deeper in the individual topics and in the discussion, I will give you a brief overview of what's currently going on in Austria. I think the most important point I think many of you heard of is that on February 24th, the Council of Ministers in Austria presented a paper in which a gambling reform was announced. And there were several key aspects in this paper mentioned. First of all, an independent gambling authority, a cross-provider blocking database, DNS blocking and blacklisting of operators without an Austrian license, new loss winnings duration limits for slot machines, restrictions for gambling advertising, adjustments of casino, gambling and betting duties, and the abolishment of the 3 casino licenses which were not yet put out to tender. Further details are not known yet, so yeah, it's quite a difficult situation in Austria. We only know that there should be a draft law sometime in April. And well, I'll tell you later on in the discussion more about the individual key aspects of this, let's say, announcement. A second issue that concerns us significantly in Austria right now is player claims. There are several litigation finances which finances these player claims. So for the individual player, it's, let's say, more or less risk-free to go to court and claim back the losses. But there are so many legal arguments, and there is also a new European Court of Justice case pending, and yeah, especially the case that the European Court of Justice could bring the decisive turnaround in this ruling. And yeah, I will go into more detail later on. So I think this was a quick overview on Austria, and let's dive into discussion later.
Thank you. So we just continue with these sort of little overviews on jurisdictions. Just crossing the border to Switzerland, Simon, you'll be covering Switzerland today, but you also talk about a very small but lovely state, which is called Liechtenstein, across the border, which has a very exciting, growing land-based casino industry. And this is sort of the European Las Vegas, which we can expect now in terms of that development. Let us know what's going on in Switzerland and in Liechtenstein, please.
Thank you very much, Jörg. I'm very pleased to do so. I understand we will have a couple of horizontal topics to cover today, such as player claims, licensing opportunities, and also to some extent the applicability of EU law in the respective jurisdictions. So I believe all of us, or Some of us will cover these topics, and I'll be happy to do so also in relation to Switzerland and Liechtenstein. And more specifically, in relation to Switzerland, Liechtenstein, I'll be happy to speak about some skill gaming licensing opportunities, as well as about the poker market, which is a separate regulatory category in both these countries. And as you alluded to correctly, Jörg, Liechtenstein is really into developing to the European Las Vegas. We are soon looking at nothing less than about 10 casinos in a small jurisdiction.
You remember the population of Liechtenstein? How many people live there?
Yes, that should be around a couple of 10,000, so about 20 to 30,000.
It's an interesting relation, right? Okay, is there anything you want to talk about Switzerland in particular as a generic overview?
Yes, so I think some of the more interesting current topics would regard the skill gaming sector, where licensing is fairly possible. It's not a ring-fenced market. You do require an authorization from the regulator in charge. However, this is an open market, and essentially any company meeting the requirements can apply and get an authorization, and I'll be pleased to say more about it later on.
Yeah, thank you. I will get back to you then very shortly. So my next speaker should be Andreas, and thank you very much for interrupting your holidays to participate in that panel today. I've just learned that you're on holiday, and we really appreciate it. So if we look at the Baltic region, what would you like to tell us as being most important?
Hi, you're not interrupting anything. Thank you very much for accepting me without, a formal shirt. So basically, if talking about the Baltics, nothing really particular going on there, which is good. Finally, good. In terms, okay, so the Baltics is never the Baltics. It's Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, because it's really. Sometimes it may be a bit confusing that it's that different from each other, but why shouldn't be, basically, because it's like in all Europe where all the states are alone in regulating themselves. So in terms of Lithuania, what's going on from the inside and what's interesting is there are companies that are trying to go the route of, let's say, horse totalizator route, as it's called. I believe many of you know that Lithuania has adopted 5 years ago the entrance burden of land-based presence burden, which is one casino or 10 slot machine saloons or 20 betting shops, which is relatively a high entry point. But there's a, let's say, there's a trick that you could go through with 5 horse totalizator points, which is basically irrelevant for the business because it's ring fenced. And horse totalizator is not the market at all in Lithuania. And as far as ring fenced, it's only the Lithuanian pools that can be used, and that's not generating. And actually, it's impossible to generate any revenue. But still, you could go into the online permit through having those 5 horse totalizator points. So this was always known for everybody, but the international players, they looked into this option, but as far as nobody took that route, nobody was really willing to go forward. And what's interesting now is that after 5 years, there are a few of the companies that are going this way, and we will see if they are, if there won't be any uh, let's say, if there won't be any obstacles from the regulator side for not allowing to go that way, because that's obvious why is this, route being used. Yeah, this is an interesting thing, and if these companies are successful, I believe there will be a less tricky, or less at least more possible ways to get into the Lithuanian market, and complying with the land-based presence, not spending the amounts of money that is required for 20 betting shops or one real casino. So that is something that is really interesting going on. From other aspects, it's really very technical, very small, very technical. It's really important for everybody already there, but not extremely important for everybody who would like to maybe consider entering. For instance, there's an amendment to the remote gaming equipment, the regulation of the remote gaming equipment, allowing the electronic roulettes, not only the mechanical roulettes, in the live dealer environment. There's the amendment of the same regulation, amending the live dealer environment, not specifically requiring a dealer. So these are very important for the products, but not extremely like a go-to or a deal breaker of anyone considering of entering the market itself. In terms of Estonia, it's a very stable country, but what I already told in February, and I can repeat that, there's an extremely intensified interest from the industry of entering of having the Estonian license for the .com operations, for the, let's say, worldwide operations, mostly because there are quite a lot of those operators who are interested in acquiring the Estonian license. They point out the bureaucracy of Malta as the first thing why they want to switch from Malta to Estonia. So that's interesting. It's not very like regulatory specific that something's changed or something's moving, but that's from the inside, from what I see, from what I hear, and what's like an interesting point.
Does it mean that Estonia is trying to become another online gaming licensing hub?
You mean Estonia itself? No,
Yes.
Estonia itself, they are not trying anything. That's an interesting point, because the regulation is the same from 2009, so it's 12 years already. More or less, everybody knows that, but I asked the regulator and the Ministry of Finance themselves, why don't you market yourselves? And they said, we're very happy the way we are. That's just it. We accept that, we allow that, and we're not into any sort of marketing our policies in any way. We're not Malta. We're not like an island of a sort of a country corporation. So we're not into that kind of a business. If you know that, if you accept our let's say terms and conditions, please enter. But we're not going to market them ourselves, and it's quite an interesting attitude. I like it. It's very clear. Let's say they require a relatively high share capital. It's €1 million as a share capital. So they pick only the businesses that they see viable in commercial wise. No like real startups or unknown prospects. and if you're, let's say, straightforward, yeah, if you accept the terms and conditions, you can go there, and that's it. So yeah, I believe it's not going to change. I believe it's not going to see tremendous, let's say, information flow from the regulator. But if the licensees or applicants will start or continue to pile up, I believe the industry will themselves know about this, from the operators, from everybody around us. Yeah, I believe that's more or less.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. Finally, can you give us the current weather report for Cuba, for Havana, at the moment? I think that's where you are currently.
No, I'm in Tenerife, actually.
You're in Tenerife, right? Then
yeah.
I was completely misinformed. Okay, but it looks brilliant to see some blue skies in the background.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, Zlatan, Montenegro, I think, is first where you can provide a report on exciting land-based developments, and then something in that area as well. I'm happy to learn more from you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. In Balkan countries, we didn't have so much regulatory activities in past period, but as I said during our last meeting a few months ago, a new betting regulation in Montenegro would be a hot topic in upcoming months, and definitely that is. Just to remind, at the end of the 2020, Ministry of Finance in Montenegro.
It's like the watchdog is behind you.
Yes, just a moment.
No problem. It's an international language. Everybody understands.
Yes, the dogs from Bosnia and Herzegovina also have the same language. He has some neighborhood here, so he's annoying. Let me continue. Sorry for this.
You register the dog as well. You know that.
Yeah, yes, just to remind, at the end of the 2020, Ministry of Finance in Montenegro put in procedure of adopting a new gaming act, and proposed act was in the public debate phase, and all stakeholders have a chance to submit the proposal for amendment on existing text. What I would like to mention is that from associations of operators, from lawyers, from other industry experts came comments, and I had a chance to read that comments, and they put a significant objection of existing text of draft, where some objections are very serious due to the fact that they indicate uncompliant with Constitution of Montenegro. As I see, also a huge number of articles are inapplicable in a practice, and would be inapplicable in practice in the put in place in the same text, and represent only a wish list by the government. Also, from other side, in Montenegro, in this draft, we have articles which are probably understandable only to the one who wrote them. So we can get back on this later, and I will give a few examples about these objections. Beside Montenegro, we have also something what is interesting in Republic of Srpska. As you mentioned in our introduction, Republic of Srpska is a federal unit. Federal unit of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they enacted a new gaming law in 2020, and the story is continuing during the 2021. I will give a short overview later about that act, but the main things is that law strengthened the role of the public company Lottery of Republic of Srpska. After that, we can discuss about process of harmonization, European Union standards in the non-member EU Balkan countries. That would be very interesting, especially in implementing legal standards from Court of Justice in legal system. And of course, if we had the time, if we have a time, we can discuss about the impact of privacy law in such various industry, and of course in betting, since I think that would be also the hot topic in 2021.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zlatan. Excellent overview, and it's a good point taken. We will definitely get back to the European legal discussion, not just with reference to your own jurisdiction, but I think that is interesting for some other jurisdictions we're covering here in our panel discussion. I'll give you a short overview on what's going on here in Germany, in my country. We can deem this year as another historical year in German history of gambling regulation, since for the first time, and in particular as of 1st of July, a new regulatory system comes into place, which is providing licenses for, I would say, casino type games. It's a reduced format, which we call virtual slot machines. So it is slot machines, but really with some restrictions. It's also including online poker for the first time. If we let apart that Schleswig-Holstein introduced a first standalone gambling act back in 2012, which is of course something unique. But for Germany nationwide, the full regulation will come into force as of 1st of July, provided by a new interstate treaty, which is going to come into force. This interstate treaty has to be signed and ratified by at least 13 German states. It has been ratified already by 13 German states, so 3 are still missing. It is expected that they will ratify. The most important of the remaining states is Saxony-Anhalt, because this state is appointed to host the newly established gambling authority, which is a centralized gambling authority for Germany, operating nationwide as well, and it's going to be built up and take over as of 1st of July. They will take more time. They will need more time to be ready to take over. Until they are, there will be sort of an interim solution by another authority in Saxony-Anhalt. But they are announcing to take first applications for new licenses after 1st of July, and promising to try to progress these licenses within 3 months if they are completely submitted. For the time being, no requirements are published anywhere, so you need to anticipate, or you need to create sort of an analogy to the existing application proceeding for sports betting, which was done and not really completed last year, still pending with some applications, where you can copy and paste few of these requirements to prepare your application for the other verticals of the online gaming sphere. And so far, that's an interesting part. We are at the end, the outgoing interstate treaty, which includes this licensing regime for sports betting. Few things will change with sports betting, but this is more changing license conditions, changing scope of betting types, which you can adopt now. Today, we have a stake limit for players. This will be replaced by a deposit limit. Both is set to €1,000 per player per month. Exemptions are possible on request, but needed to be approved. There's still a lot of discussions about the details, but that's something that is really interesting for the industry. We've seen that a lot of huge operators successfully applied for a sports betting license. We assume that there are maybe between 30 and 40 pending applications. Some of them will be processed very shortly. Some can be taken over into the next area of regulation under the forthcoming interstate treaty. Apart from that, it's worth to mention that for online casino type games currently, there's still this online gambling ban that applies, and it will apply until the current interstate treaty is going to expire by the end of June. But to transfer the traffic and to transfer the operators who are willing to comply, to apply for a license into the new regulatory environment, there's a transitional regime that's been established as of 15th of October, which is not a really legal piece of act, which is not going to legalize the offers, but it's sort of a factual toleration of that offers. So if operators comply with these requirements stipulated in the so-called joint guidelines of regulators, of the supreme regulators in Germany. There's no enforcement against these. And this is an approach to transfer the market. It's not a good approach because there's still some legal uncertainty. Finally, there's a change in taxation. As you know, Germany in the past, and of course now and always in the future, taxed every gambling operator who served customers in Germany, no matter whether this operator is operating legally or illegally, so meaning with a license or without a license. That may be different compared to other jurisdictions. In the past and currently, there's a tax rate of VAT, 19% for casino games, on gross gaming revenue, and 5% on stakes for sports betting industry. There is a change of the horse racing and lottery acts, which takes place just now, will come into effect as of 1st of July. And only the German Bundesrat, which is the second chamber, will have a final saying on this, but it's expected they will approve it. And it says that the tax rate regarding all these online gaming verticals, including sports betting, virtual slot machines, and online poker, to mention the most important ones, should be 5.3% on stakes. For the online casino type industry, this is not good news because it's definitely very high to remain competitive. For sports betting, it has been reported that this is an increase of the 5%, but actually it's not, because the calculation of tax and the tax base and its definition is different. It's quite complicated to explain, but you can say the tax base, even for sports betting, is stakes minus taxes, and you will be ending up with roughly 5% as well. That's just a minor detail. This is what's going on at the moment. And then we see some enforcement activities increasing against those operators who were not complying, do not apply for licenses, or not showing willingness to apply for licenses. We can say that there are interdiction letters on their way, and there's efforts to apply payment blocking, which lies with the responsibility of the Ministry of the Interior in Lower Saxony. Of course, in view of regulators, this makes perfect sense because they need to protect the compliance operators on those willing to comply. Whether they create a market that will be competitive and whether channeling as the intended goal of regulation from the black market into the regulated market will be successfully conducted, that's the biggest question mark, because what we learned from reports outside of Germany is that those foreign companies who do not change their product and continue to offer what they offered in the past really increase their turnover, where other turnover broke down really significantly with all these operators who try to comply and are compliant. So politically, we are facing a complete disaster, but for the time being, there's no way to change it other than to try to improve it. This is my snapshot on Germany, and now we're happy to continue with presentations and discussions focusing on some of the items you all raised. But before I do that, and before I touch on that questions, I'm happy to ask the audience if you have any specific questions and want to direct one of these questions towards one of the panelists, to what's already been said, please just drop me a note via the chat function in that software here. And I'm happy to take your question and address it to the relevant speaker. That's my invitation now. So every second minute, I will look at the chat function, see if something's coming in.
I think there is already a question for you, Jörg.
Yeah, I see that. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Yes. The question is enforcement handled at the country level or at the regional level in Germany? Good question, and not always easy to understand. Let me say this: the responsibility and the legal competence to conduct enforcement against illegal operators basically lies with the authority of each German land, and it's limited to the border of such German state. So if, for instance, Lower Saxony is going to send out an interdiction letter to an operator asking him to cease its operations, this would be limited to the territory of Lower Saxony. Unless, and this is possible, the states authorize themselves to act on behalf of more than one state. We've seen it in the past up to 11 or even 13 states all together in one interdiction letter signed by one authority. It's still not the standard case, but it can happen. But the legal situation is an interdiction letter which is delivered by one authority, one regulator, concerns that particular authority as well. If it's going to be challenged, the litigation also concentrates on the situation in that particular state and has no direct impact to the other states, Germany, but of course, they can follow up and do the same. There's an exception, which is important if we talk about payment blocking. This responsibility lies within the sole discretion and competence of the Minister of the Interior in Lower Saxony, because that has been stipulated in the interstate treaty. And if it's going about to cover advertising, for instance, there's a specific competence even for approving of advertising permits for legal advertising. Same thing with Düsseldorf, the capital is North Rhine-Westphalia. The district government in Düsseldorf has been appointed to be relevant and competent for advertising. And for sports betting, we have a nationwide responsibility of the regional council in Darmstadt, which is the authority that conducts the current and the next sports betting application proceeding, and definitely will also check whether the reliability of applicants is fine. And this includes looking at the other verticals. So if you apply for a sports betting license in Darmstadt and you're a multi-channel operator offering online poker and virtual slot machines, that particular regulator will also look at your vertical offerings. And if that's fine, you're going to be deemed reliable, which is then fully compliant and you can get a license. If you're not complying with your verticals, Darmstadt will tell you that you cannot get the Darmstadt license for Germany in sports betting, and you will also not be regarded reliable for any other German gambling license. Hope this answers your question. And thanks for taking that note. Rafaela, I think we get back to Austria. Two things are important which we can cover on a cross-jurisdictional discussion. I think there's, first of all, these player claims. That is something, whenever we have an active online gaming market, where the licensing regime is not available for all the stakeholders in the market, there is this discussion that players get back to the operator, basically represented by a law firm or by a litigation financing institution, as you have that in Austria as well. I think this applies to Austria. It's the same issue in Germany. It's massive here. I guess, Simon, it will be also part of a case in Switzerland. The argument usually is because there's an interdiction, these offerings are an infringement of a legal prohibition. So it's against the law. If it's against the law in terms of civil legal assessment, it might be regarded null and void, looking at the agreement between players and casinos. And so they're going to claim back their losses. This is something I would like to point out, that in Austria, there's an extreme situation. I think this is because of a jurisdiction, of a decision of your Supreme Court. Maybe you can give us some background. Probably we discussed this with Simon, a little bit in Germany, everybody else who's going to contribute to that particular problem. And then I would like to move over to the European Union arguments. And I think Austria can build the bridge because the decision or the pending case at the ECJ you were mentioning deals with player claims, if I'm not wrongly informed. But it's, of course, it's not just only that we need to consider in this particular regard.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you're completely right. These kind of player claims are keeping us incredibly busy in Austria. As I mentioned before, there are several process finances. One is, for example, Adwofin, which are financing the processes for the players. So it's for them, more or less risk-free to go to court. It all goes back to a ruling of the Austrian Supreme Court in 2017, where the Supreme Court said that operators without an Austrian license are illegal and are not allowed to offer, and losses can be claimed back. Well, I said 2017, and that's it. Since 2017, there were no further highest court decisions with the new arguments. So in the last few years, we collected a lot of arguments why the Austrian monopoly is not in line with European Union law. And the whole ecosystem in Austria regarding gambling changed. We now have a monopolist, and the main shareholder, the 60% shareholder, is the Czech Satzke Group. And there are so many aspects regarding incoherence of the Austrian regulation. There are so many mistakes regarding the advertising of the monopolist, which even incites non-players to play. And so many other arguments why the Austrian monopoly infringes the European Union law. So we are very busy bringing these arguments to the courts. And we really hope that now, at least soon, the highest court's ruling also change. And as you mentioned, several national courts, let's say, fine interruption orders. So they interrupt the national proceedings and wait for the European Court of Justice deciding the case fluctus influentum. And I think that there will be a decision autumn or end of the year. And by then the Austrian courts wait with their national proceedings. So there are a lot of arguments why the Austrian monopoly is infringing European Union law. And if you and somewhere from the audience is affected by this kind of player claims, please get in touch. We have so many arguments to help you in your court cases. Yeah, I think that's.
Do you think that
for now? Yeah.
Do you think that a ruling of the ECJ in favor of the industry, let's say this, would have a direct impact on the player claim situation as well, because it would then object against the monopoly situation, probably with the same argument which we had back in 2006 in Germany, rendered by the Constitutional Court, when the lotteries in these days, when we have the monopoly on lotteries and sports betting, when they looked at the way they're practicing business and see that kind of advertising is more like with the private industry, similar to that, instead of gambling addiction focused. It took them years until things changed. But this is more the issue, can you justify the monopoly, yes or no? But if it affects the situation that the regulation is no longer applicable, because it's an infringement of European Union law protecting freedom of services of the operators as well, could that have impact on the civil legal arguments of the lawyers representing the players asking back for refunds?
I think it's always the problem with the European Court of Justice and its decisions. But in this case, it's an Austrian case. Although it's regarding slot machines, I think it will also have an impact on online gambling, because in this case, exactly these questions that are crucial for Austria are mentioned. So the advertising and the coherence, and we've done a lot of educational work, and we have a lot of court cases mentioning exactly this kind of arguments. So yeah, let's hope for the best.
Right. Simon, Switzerland, interesting situation to legally offer online gambling. You need to liaise with a licensed land-based casino, to my understanding, or be a land-based casino. And if you're not privileged like this, you'll be deemed illegal operator, even if you're on the market. So I suppose there are some, and I also suppose you have the same issues with player claims in Switzerland. What's the situation there?
Yeah, there have been player claims indeed. Of course, as I suspect, as soon as you have a certain ambiguity between the regulated market and the gray market, there are these player claims. The situation is somehow different in Switzerland compared to Austria and Germany. First of all, the EU law component is not really there, but that's more on a side note. And then we kind of have to dive into the details of contractual law. And there it gets interesting because from gambling and betting, only so-called hindered obligations are born according to the Code of Obligations. So what does that mean? Such claims from the operator side would not be fully enforceable towards the player. However, if the player did pay a debt, he or she nevertheless paid a debt. So it's not considered paying a non-debt, but it's considered paying a so-called moral obligation. So in other words, if you have complied by paying that moral obligation, and I think that perception comes very much from people sitting around the table, playing around themselves, you know that this is somewhere not maybe in a fully regulated situation, but if you pay that debt, you have fulfilled a moral obligation. So normally you wouldn't be able to claim it back. So it's really about details of contracts law.
Right. Okay. That's perfect. Different, totally different angle. Andreas and Zlatan, is there any issue with player claims in your jurisdictions as well, or is this something which you haven't faced so far?
Okay, I think Andreas was the first name, not Zlatan. So hi. No, actually, not really, until at least not until now. But okay, there is no connection to the markets being monopolized. So in this respect, the player claims there could be the player claims since against the unlicensed operators, and all of the, let's say, unlicensed operators are blacklisted, and it's the same idea as everywhere else, except of the monopoly side. What is currently going on in, let's say, in Lithuania in terms of the sort of player claims is a very interesting angle in the poker financing sphere, where the players are financed to play poker in the unlicensed, with the unlicensed operators, and they the situations that the players did not pay to the finances, claiming that they were forced to play with the unlicensed operators, and these contracts are null and void and stuff like that. So these are currently in the courts. The lawyers behind one of the parts tried to use the argument of the European law, and tried to forward the case to the European courts, but unsuccessfully. And the courts just claimed that the local court just confirmed that there's no unanimous, like united European regulation in respect to this. So it's currently with the local courts. I believe until the end of the year we will have the decisions, but it's the different angle. It's not the same angle. It's not like direct claims from the players against the unlicensed operators. I believe that is something that would be interesting to try for the locals. I am not aware how aware they are of this possibility, because it's relatively inexpensive to try. And so yeah, it would be very, very interesting to try it with in Lithuania and Latvia. I don't suppose it would work in Estonia. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So we're expecting an update in one of our next mini meetups, probably on the decisions. Thank you.
Yeah, I will update. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, Zlatan, I'm not supposing that there's a big player reclaim issue in your jurisdictions. If so, happy to learn more about it. Let us know. But if not,
yeah, you are completely right. We don't have so much experience regarding prior claims in Balkan countries. Something what is happening here, and that is not strange, is some internally proceedings according to terms and conditions, which all operators have on their web page, and sometimes players are not satisfied with some internally decision, but as my best information as I have, there is no such claim such we have in Austria. But for me, that's a very interesting question which Rafaela mentioned, the effects of the Court of Justice preliminary rulings on the interpretation of the European law. So I'm definitely expecting to see what is going to happen in Austria, because definitely there is open question and always hot topic between this monopoly, state monopoly, abuse dominant position, and freedom of internal market, which is some of fundamental freedom in the European Union. Regarding these claims, individual claims, we don't have, as I said, so much experience. Of course, I will keep you updated once when I heard that something is happening on courts in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yeah, can you let us know how or in which way, let's say, European Union law or jurisprudence can be applied to Balkan countries?
Yes, that's also very interesting question, since every country in Balkan seeks to join the European Union in the near future. So the legal ground for harmonization European standard in non-EU member Balkan country is definitely stabilization and the association agreement, and that harmonization of the legal standard of candidate or potential candidate country with the EU legal system is one of the key activities taking into account while assessing fulfillment of European Union accession criteria. Harmonization of the law with the EU law means the construction of new legal system on the principles as the base of accepting and applying 35 chapters of Acquis Communitarium. The main objective for the future of European Union members such Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia is reaching the required capacity for the implementation of law, policy and procedures. So in other words, accepting all rights and obligations as the basis of functioning and progress of European Union. To be compliant with EU law is not a question only related to betting industry. It's highly connected with competition law, tax law, and of course functioning of the internal market as well. We need to be aware that these countries are developing countries, and according to that fact, regulatory processes need huge reform to ensure putting standards of European Union in the first place, beside, let me say, other interests which we look on daily basis.
Right, I see. It's quite complicated to get into the European Union as a new member state, as it is complicated to get out of it, as we recently seen. Does it mean if some of these countries are preparing for a membership, that the courts will also consider to apply at least the thoughts of European Union law, or even European Union law in sort of an analogy or directly? Or will they wait and simply apply the domestic law?
Well, it's also very, very interesting and complex question. For example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the goal of Bosnia and Herzegovina is to become a member of the European Union, and definitely we raising the questions of the application of supranational law in Bosnia and Herzegovina, both in terms of preparing for membership and the country status after entering some in the future in the European Union. So when we are looking at this question, so for Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Europeanization is started, and this is evident in the signing of this association and stabilization agreement. But formally, of course, the European Union is not a state and the treaties are not the constitution, but nevertheless, the European treaty deals with constitutional questions and provide answers in legal binding way, of course. So it's very important to clarify the relationship between international, supranational, and domestic competence of court, for example, European Court of Justice and any other court in Bosnia Herzegovina. This is a very important question because it's not the need for such clarification is based on principle of effectiveness of legal protection and legal certainty as an integral part of the principle of the rule of law. So the complexity of jurisdiction at the multi-state level can be described as a conflict among courts of different level in networking legal system. But one remarkable decision from German Constitutional Court, Solange, is used the model of cooperation, and that's the answer of this question. The courts in Bosnia and Herzegovina are obliged to apply the case of law of the European Union in accordance with Article 72 Stabilization and Association Agreement. And based on this agreement, for example, competition law in Bosnia and Herzegovina prescribes an obligation for the national regulatory body and competent court to take into consideration case law from European Union Court and the decision from European Commission. So if, for example, competent authority decide about abuse of dominant position, for example, in betting, that competent authority needs to comply with legal standard based on a European Union case law. We know that European Court from Justice provide general guidance on the interpretation on the fundamental freedoms of internal market in the area, for example, of online gambling and other aspects of gambling, so that national court can assess the circumstances under which restrictive national gambling laws are justified on ground related to general interest. So, but in Bosnia and Herzegovina, it is hard to expect from judges to implement this ex officio. The parties are more likely to point out the application of the standard themselves rather than expect them from court to do that. So yes, they are obliged. That is not soft law. That is binding legal obligation. But in practice, we don't see so much implementation of case law of European Union. Situation is much better with the European Court. Human court, so there is a much better situation, but in the European court that is not so good.
I understood this is important information for the general councils of the industry. Thank you very much. Simon, the beautiful Switzerland lies in the heart of Europe, but not European Union. But so very comfortable situation, you can do what you want almost. But I think if we discuss European law with relevance for Switzerland, it's rather more than sort of case law, European case law that applies or that needs to be considered. Can you focus on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. And I'll be actually happy to contrast maybe the Swiss situation with the Balkan situation. So I'll say a few words also in relation to the Balkans briefly and contrast it with Switzerland. The political background, I believe, of the relationship EU and Balkans needs to be taken into account also in relation to what Zlatan just said, because there is a certain irony to it. The European Union, and more specifically the European Commission, has more leverage towards candidate countries than to actual member states. So as long as you're only a candidate country, there is the famous carrot on the stick. And the European Commission can impose all kind of requirements to accession countries. Legally speaking, actually, some of these requirements are quite controversial, but the European Commission has the leverage. But once a country is a member state, and we have seen that on in relation to a couple of countries in Eastern Europe, that leverage is no longer there. And it's difficult to impose standards towards the own members. So having said that, the leverage is somehow different towards Switzerland, because the appetite, it seems, of Switzerland to become a member seems a little bit reduced. And in that sense, the situation politically is different. So Switzerland has a complex network of many bilateral agreements with the European Union. And some of them go very far, such as free movement of persons, which essentially implements, I would say, to 99% the free movement of persons rules that the European Union has also within the Union. So, for instance, you can seek employment or self-employment in Switzerland pretty much under the same conditions as you could in any other member state of the Union. But more specifically to gambling and online gambling and the European argument, the argument is limited for the reason that Switzerland does exactly not have an agreement on services with the European Union. And of course, the strongest argument to provide services under the EU rules would be the services argument. So that one is exactly not available. And for that reason, Switzerland not being part of the EU and EEA, that argument is fairly weakened in the Swiss context. I hope that answers to some extent your question.
Oh yes, thank you very much. And it's a lovely scope to have these two countries that are not member states of the European Union, but with a total different angle in terms of their perspective, and then discussing things with member states, of course, like in Austria and in Germany and others. That's certainly a very interesting comparison.
I can add, if you're allowed, to the complexity. I only spoke about Switzerland. Now, in relation to Liechtenstein, Liechtenstein is actually part of the internal market. Why is that? Because while Liechtenstein is not an EU country, it is an EEA member, just like Norway and Iceland. But because of its sheer small size, Liechtenstein, as a fun fact, is actually the only member of that whole European Economic Area that has negotiated a quota for free movement of persons. So you and I cannot just settle in Liechtenstein as we please, as employed or self-employed persons, but there are quotas that Liechtenstein at the time managed to negotiate.
We don't need to settle there as long as they keep the border open. We can then live somewhere in the close neighborhood and cross the border day and night time then. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. I like to stick to you because I remember when you did your first introduction today, you were mentioning skill games and poker. And I think that's something very interesting in Switzerland, which I think is a little different to what we usually understand when we define this sort of categories, in particular skill game. I would be happy to get more information on that.
I have to provide that in a nutshell. So poker is really an interesting case in Switzerland because it is kind of a subcategory of casino games at large. And I shall be careful in distinguishing land-based and online. So starting with land-based first, with the entry into effect of the Gaming Act, land-based tournaments outside casinos have become possible again. For 10 years, this has not been possible because of a Supreme Court decision that held that poker was more of a game of chance than a game of skill. And for that reason, they couldn't be organized outside casinos. This has now changed. And while it is cantonal, so regional competence in general, most cantons, by far, most cantons now allow these poker tournaments outside casinos. When we then look at the online sector, there is another highly interesting aspect because you mentioned rightly that international operators usually would have to cooperate with Swiss casinos in order to offer online in the regulated market. Now, what has often been a hurdle for such corporations were former market activities that were deemed to be as a bad acting behavior. And therefore, many of these operators have to respect the cool down period when it comes to casino games. Interestingly enough, that clause does not apply for online poker. So that means that international operators, even if they have offered on the market before, are not disqualified by former market activities in that area.
I think if there were a bad actor clause for online poker operators who used to serve the customers in the past, and they apply it, there would not many operators be left to offer casino online poker in Switzerland, because I think these are big stakeholders, of course.
Indeed, and especially in the online poker field, the situation is somehow different to other online casino games, because typically these online poker providers would have their own platforms. And in that context, I should add that international liquidity is possible in the Swiss market, which then, of course, makes it a much more attractive offer.
Is online poker regarded as a casino game when you look at the land-based industry? In Germany, it is the case. Can only be offered by casinos legally or online with a specific license?
You can imagine it as a subcategory of casino games. So very broadly and generally speaking, yes, it's considered a casino game. However, with the exceptions, regulatory exceptions, important exceptions that I just mentioned, both in the land-based sector. So for instance, any other casino game you cannot offer outside casinos. Poker you can.
Right.
And online the same, bad actor clause doesn't apply.
Right. How about shared liquidity for online poker? Limited to Swiss people, or is it international cross-border?
No, so indeed it's not limited to Bodensee and Lake Geneva, but it is actually global shared liquidity, unless of course other jurisdictions expressly do not allow that, such as the poker pool between France, Spain, Portugal.
Thank you, Simon. Rafaela, we haven't prepared that question, but I think we're talking about poker, and there was a history in Austria with card casinos or card room poker events, which is quite fascinating to follow, ups and downs. Is there anything that you can provide as the current status?
Well, yeah, the court cases regarding the Concord card casinos and poker outside casinos were lost. At the end, it was mainly a tax issue. And right now, poker is a game of chance by law. Land-based poker can only be offered in land-based casinos. And online poker is part of the only online gambling license. And so only Win Today is allowed to offer poker in Austria. So yeah, quite a sad situation right now. Not a lot of different offers. But what I really want to mention is maybe, or to give you a quick insight in the political situation in Austria, and maybe speak a little bit about why we have this gambling reform right now. And I think there are two super important points what I really like to discuss, if it's okay for you, Jörg.
Oh, please go ahead.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Because I think one should one should understand that we have this gambling reform right now because the gambling industry is not getting out of the headlines of the newspapers. It all started with the infamous statement of the later vice chancellor in Ibiza that Novomatic pays everyone. And then there were such a lot of events that followed. There was an appointment of the CFO of the monopolist, which was suspected to be part of a political deal. there was a house search at the flat of the current finance minister in Austria. And there were such a lot of events in the environment of corruption and or intransparency. So I think the pressure on the government was so incredibly high that they needed, or it was needed that they react in some case. And so we have this, let's say, announcement and punctuation now, and the announced gambling reform. And one of the most important points in this gambling reform is the new independent gambling authority. Many of you know that in Austria we have the specific situation that the finance minister is shareholder or co-shareholder of the monopolist, a licensing authority, and supervisory authority. So a certain conflict of interest is imminent. So it's super important to have this new gambling authority, and we as an association really appreciate this approach and fully support this, to have this kind of independent gambling authority, which in future, what we know now is that they are responsible for licensing and supervision. So it's a really good approach. And but the second thing is we are also discussing about IP blocking, DNS blocking in Austria right now. And this is certainly a huge problem, because to have IP blocking without having a licensing system doesn't make any sense in our point of view. So if the draft law will come like it is announced now, there will be only one operator left on the market in Austria, and this would cause a huge damage on economic, on sport, on everything, because you have to keep in mind that in Austria there are a lot of operators working with their licenses from other European Union member states. And these operators pay taxes in Austria. In 2019, they paid 123 million euro taxes. They provide 1,000 jobs in Austria. They support the sport and media landscape with about 100 million euro per year. So it would really cause a huge damage to block this kind of operators. And this is currently my core task, to raise the awareness for these operators. And we currently have a huge media campaign going on, and focusing on exactly these points. And we hope to influence the political process in a way that there will be licenses for operators based in the European Union, having European Union licenses. And maybe in future we will also have these licenses in Austria. So
good luck, Rafaela. So
fingers crossed.
Important mission to build up credibility and transparency. And I think that new framework, if it's properly done, is the only way to protect players, because this uncertainty which is provided by all these questionable systems cannot protect anyone.
And also to raise the awareness that there are also other operators from outside the European Union working on the Austrian market, and we also have an interest to keep them out, because you have to be fully compliant and follow strict player protection, anti-money laundering, whatever.
There's a new player bearing system considered as well, which works then nationwide for the future in Austria.
Yes, it is proposed that there will be a blocking that database for players, and we will see if the monopolist is the only one in this database, or
meaning players could be self-excluded or excluded from access.
It's a kind of self-exclusion database, but like all the other points, we do not have more information right now on that. And we will see.
Zlatan, I think that is something interesting. We just learned that in Austria, obviously, among other reasons, some unpleasant public discussions gave reason to think about changing politics, changing regulatory environment. What was the reason for the governments in Montenegro or in that province, Srpska, to consider changing law for gambling regulation? Was there everything that happened, or is this just a normal, a standard political process saying we need to review and find that we need to do something?
Well, I will start with Republic of Srpska. So the law strengthened the role of the public company Lottery of Republic of Srpska, as I mentioned on the beginning of the panel. The Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Srpska has abolished the right to organize electronic games by private organizers. According to the new law, such games can only be organized by Lottery of Republic of Srpska, which can then independently select another company for the organization of these games. This selection and public purchase was the subject of a decision of the Constitutional Court of Republic of Srpska, and the court stressed that this procedure of selection was not in accordance with the Constitution and other applicable law. So Association of Betting Operators requests from Lottery of Republic of Srpska to implement the court decision and announce a new public purchaser. Certain changes also apply to the taxation of gains from games of chance. The tax collection depends on the residence of the winner or the seat of the organizer, and they represent budgetary revenue for the local government unit. The tax on profit will be paid in favor of the budget of the local government unit in which the winner is located. So if the winner is a non-resident, the tax should be paid based on the location where the payment was made. Bosnia has no state law on gambling or chance games, but a similar controversy arose in 2016 in Bosnia's other entity, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In the same way, a proposed law they're aimed to tax any wins, even winnings less than 50 euros, which is the same case in the Republic of Srpska. The text, prescription of the law they confirm that. So I cannot say that these changes are something what is let me say normally process in a state which need to hear all stakeholders which will implement that law, and which will of course organize their business and employ the employees and have and pay tax in that
I think that is something you have in common with many other jurisdictions. It's been driven by litigation, probably by public discussion, or by a commercially driven attitude. Right. I will take the chance now, because we have about maybe 10, 15 minutes left for our discussion, to ask the audience, if you have any questions, please send them to us via the chat function. Happy to take them. I will be looking at it in a second, of course. Andreas, you mentioned that the Baltic states, they're all different. We cannot say this is the Baltics. They're all similar, beautiful. The capitals, I love all of them. It's so beautiful, so nice. So if you look at the differences, how is the political culture within that states? Meaning, how does the dialogue work between the industry, maybe the lobbyists, and the politicians if it comes to changing regulatory environment?
Okay, it is indeed, these countries are indeed different. However, there are a bit more similar to each other and not and different, at all. So Lithuania and Latvia would be more or less similar in this respect. Estonia, everybody regards to, even not not specifically allowed, but regard to Estonians as the most, the smartest brother, the most intelligently capable brother, because they keep everything really transparent, straightforward, very very reasonable. So the industry in Lithuania and in Latvia works. Okay, all of the countries have their the regulators. However, the Lithuanian and Latvian regulators are separate entities, like real entities. The Estonian regulator is a part of the Tax and Customs Board, so basically the tax authority. It's the department. It's around I believe 7 people, something like that. So, however, in Lithuania and Latvia, these are the proper entities where they are asked questions by the parliament all of the time. They are pushed to answer why they are the black market, why the advertising is not as straight as let's say transparent as it should be, why everybody is annoyed of the advertisements and stuff like that. So that is why sometimes, even if the regulator is on the industry side, they are always pushed to do the work. So on the industry side, there are both in Lithuania and Latvia, there are in Lithuania, there are 2, and in Latvia, more or less 1 association of the operators, of the industry, members of the industry. And the more or less the lobby is done through the associations. In some sort of a way, let's say in Lithuania, the associations are 2, and it's more or less because of the fractured. The industry is not united. These are the, let's say, in sometimes the associations work together, but sometimes they are in opposition to each other due to the attitude to some sort of the points. There aren't a lot of, you were speaking about the corruption and similar stuff, or major events concerning gambling. These are not, it's not something really in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia that would be the case. It's more of a, but it's not related to this particular reason. So it works more or less as it should. It works more or less as it should. I would say that it's the self-regulation works more or less well, and yeah.
Right. Hopefully it will work more well than less well in the future. I'd like to get back to Germany just for a second, because Rafael, you told me you're looking forward to receiving a centralized body that will be responsible for gambling supervision, and all regulatory matters, including licensing. Same here in Germany, in Saxony-Anhalt. I mentioned that it will take some time until this authority is ready, but I think it's important that you have someone who is relevant to talk to, and to answer questions, and to give some guidance. At the moment, for the industry in Germany, it's really hard to get answers to what requirements are really requested if you want to be compliant. You can certainly go to the regional council in Darmstadt if it concerns sports betting. They're happy to answer and do their best to provide that information. But if someone is going to ask questions for the casino games, for the transitional regime, virtual slot machines, it's hard to find a regulator who says, well, I'm now responsible to provide the answers. Probably they do sort of supervision and enforcement, and then they look at you and find you're not compliant. And so far, I think it's a good step for Germany to improve this sort of communication. The only issue is, that's my experience, it will take some time until this what I call sort of dialogue will really be working. We learned this in regulation in Schleswig-Holstein, and also with sports betting. Once the authority has been built up and they start from scratch, they're new. Same happens to Saxony-Anhalt. There are people being hired to probably never heard about gaming, and they will be decision makers in the near future. So we have to give them some time and to mutual educate the industry and the regulators and build up this level of confidence and trust. And that takes time, but it works. We have good experiences with Schleswig-Holstein over the years. We're making good experience with Darmstadt, that they're really learning. It makes sense to talk. I think this is important for all the regulators in the world to approach the industry and to be accessible. That's something I just wanted to mention, sort of a summary. Right. Zoltan, you just sent a message that we all make sure to register for the Mare Balticum Summit, Gaming Summit, May 30 and May 80. Meetups will host discussions with the Baltic and Nordic regulators. Registration is free on Mare Balticum Gaming. So have a look at the chat function. It's listed there again. I think it's very important to keep informed while the industry is technically and regulatory in a perfect motion of development. Take the opportunity to ask my co-panelists if there's anything you want to comment on, you want to say, or raise questions during the last 3 minutes we have until time is over. So please let me know. Looks like we've almost covered everything. There are no more questions in the audience. Well, under these circumstances, we'll be really on time. Let me thank, on behalf of all of us, Zoltan for putting this panel together, for hosting this event today and doing this frequently. I think it's a great idea. It's a wonderful format. Thanks to my esteemed co-panelists for providing your insights and sharing these with us. And of course, we're all waiting for a time when we can all meet again in person. And I would like to invite you for a drink now, but it's just boring to do it digitally. So you get 2 drinks next time I see you. And we'll go immediately after our panel session and find the next pub in order to let me keep my promise. Thank you very much. All of you stay safe and looking forward to seeing you again, hopefully very shortly.
Thank you, Jörg. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Rafaela, Zlatan, Simon, and Andrius. It was nice to see you once again on screen. And yeah, like you said, hopefully we will meet soon in person, but I have some lovely information that we received from Radisson Blu yesterday from the whole network that they can start hosting live events starting autumn with an exception that you need to book a laboratory to do on the spot tests for all participants. So I don't think it's going to be that pleasant for participants to fly to conferences and being tested once every 2 weeks or month, but let's hope that this will change in 2022. Okay, so yeah, thank you once again for this mini meetup, and let's meet up again soon. In April, we have the Gaming Americas Q2 meetup on the 29th of April. We will be doing a mini meetup on cybersecurity and neo-banking as well soon. And yeah, let's stay in touch. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.